Today on the TMZ Podcast.
Welcome to the TMZ Podcast. Derek and Eric here. How you doing?
Good. Better than Don Lemon.
Wow, better than Don Lemon, who's, some sour grapes over there at CNN.
Lemon sour grapes?
Lemon sour grapes. Lemon heads, if you will. So, listen, yesterday was a big day in news for newsmen. And Don Lemon was let go. Tucker Carlson was let go from Fox News. Don Lemon from CNN. But the Don Lemon situation really sort of blew up. Because Don Lemon tweeted on Monday morning, he said that he was stunned to learn that he had been let go from CNN after 17 years. He said he would have thought that someone in management would have had the decency to tell me directly. This is what he wrote out to his millions of Twitter followers. CNN quickly said, you know what, Mr. Newsman, that reporting is inaccurate. We actually gave you the opportunity to meet with management. You chose not to, and you chose to run to Twitter and release this statement. And the network said, listen, we did move in a different direction. You were no longer sort of invited to come back. You've had a series of dust-ups, given the situation with Nikki Haley, where he said she was past her prime. There was a sort of hot mic moment over Jon Stewart, where he said, he gets away with a lot because he's a comedian. And then very recently, there was this exchange with presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy.
Actually, the funny fact is black people did not get to enjoy the other freedoms until their Second Amendment rights were secured. And I think that's one of the lessons that we learned.
Still aren't allowed to enjoy the freedoms.
I disagree with you on that, Don. I disagree with you. I think you're doing a disservice to our country by failing to recognize the fact that we have equality before the law.
When you are in black skin and you live in this country, then you can disagree with me, but we're not.
Well, here's where you and I have a different point of view. I think we should be able to express our views regardless of the color of our skin. We should have this debate
I'm not saying you
without me regarding you as a black man,
but
me regarding you as a fellow citizen.
That's what I think we should see. Whatever ethnicity you are, explaining to me
whatever ethnicity
about what it's like to be black
whatever
in America.
Ethnicity I'm, I'll tell you.
Look, you can see how testy that exchange got. Vivek Ramaswamy is going to be a big figure in politics, it looks like, going forward. And he has that sort of a bit of condescension in the way that he's dealing with Don.
Trolliness. And that's what, cable network want that in their talking heads.
Yes. These are exciting moments for cable news. But, this is, Vivek is going to, he presents like this. Don maybe should have been more prepared, shouldn't have seemed so testy. At one point, the producers are in his ear, and he said, stay out of my ear so I can get my point together. He has been, I would say, flubbing a little bit of late, or floundering, but we're also looking for more with Don Lemon.
Well, that's the thing. So Vivek went on Fox News Digital, and he said that he thinks that exchange is what got Don fired.
Yes, of course.
I don't think so.
I don't either.
I think it's cumulative. The saying that whatever ethnicity you are was not a great look, but I agree with Don Lemon in that exchange, but I think it was the culmination of things, and probably the bigger issue, like you said, the producer thing, where the producers are trying to talk to him in his ear, and he's like yelling at the producers. Right. There have been stories for months that he's been difficult to work with, and it's been chaos on the set. So it might have just been, like you said, the culmination of the thing about Nikki Haley, the thing about Jon Stewart, the yelling at the producers on air. They were just tired of him.
Yeah, look, the morning show has been an awkward fit for Don Lemon, because prior to this, Don Lemon had a primetime show. He had the lead-in from, these are the old days with Cuomo would lead in. But, he had the stage himself. He was able to sort of pontificate and express his views one-on-one to the camera. Now that he sits on that dais, it was always awkward because his word choice is sometimes questionable. You hear it here in this clip where he says, whatever ethnicity you are. You obviously heard it in the Nikki Haley clip where he said she's no longer in her prime. These types of things become huge headlines and flashpoints. I don't necessarily think Don Lemon has malice in his heart, or he meant to insult Vivek's race, or even that he meant necessarily to directly insult Nikki Haley.
Well, he thought his race was being insulted by this guy who is not black telling him how black people were liberated by the NRA. He was like, no, you're not going to sit here and tell me that.
Right. And but they become sort of these flashpoints, right? Everything becomes sort of, it goes through the Twitter cycle of like, how dare you, Don Lemon? The trolls all come out, then there's a backlash and so forth. I don't think he was well suited for the morning show, and they didn't have a place, according to CNN, they didn't have a slot to stick him back in. They've already sort of changed their programming from his evening show, and now Don Lemon is out. Now, obviously, he went out with a very noisy exit. Sometimes you see the statements of like, after 17 years, I've enjoyed my time here, best of luck. That's not one of these statements.
It just kind of shows that it was a contentious relationship between Don Lemon and CNN, clearly had been for some time. So yeah, I think they're done with each other.
Yeah, I think so too. Now the question becomes, where will Don Lemon end up? News Nation is trying to make a run at becoming a sort of relevant news network.
Right. They just went 24 hours.
Yes, they've gone 24 hours. They're trying to compete openly with CNN and Fox News, who are the juggernauts in this space. As I said, Tucker Carlson is now gone from Fox News. Don Lemon, a big player at CNN, is gone. Does News Nation, swoop in and try to grab Don Lemon and Tucker Carlson?
They've tried. They said
they have tried. They said you'll make much less money, but you have a home here. I'm not sure that's the best move. I mean, they're name brands, but News Nation's trying to make its own brand. They're trying to mint their own stars.
They're trying to be Fox and CNN at the same time.
Exactly. They're trying to thread that needle, and I'm not sure you want to bring over the two big stars who are so identified with those other networks. I would have thought they'd try to mint their own new stars, but this is sort of built-in of notoriety, and so maybe they'll go in this direction.
And me being sort of optimistic here is Tucker and Don both being gone on the same day. Are new networks maybe finally trying to move away from outrage, because so much of news is driven by just making you angry, either because you disagree with it or because they're telling you things that you're mad about the other side or whatever. Maybe we can get back to actual news and not just outrage and screaming.
That's an interesting take. I'm not sure I would read that much into these two anchors being let go, but maybe this could be a harbinger of sort of a sea change, a paradigm shift in the way that we deliver news back to the old.
Maybe people are just exhausted of being angry all the time.
Maybe.
Or
look,
maybe not.
News didn't always look this way. This is a product of the 24-hour news cycle and this sort of omnipresence of like needing hot takes for ratings. It wasn't always this way. When we grew up, the news guys were like white, stodgy old men with blocky heads who spoke in a baritone.
And it can be certainly more diverse than that. But what's interesting is the anchors that we were watching as kids. It's funny. Tom Brokaw is very conservative.
Yes.
Dan Rather is very liberal, and you could get little hints of that. But they just gave you the news.
Yes.
It wasn't, here's why you should be angry today, and here's what this idiot said.
Although I remember as the tides were shifting underneath their feet and news was going more in the direction of the Don Lemons and the Tucker Carlsons and the Hannitys and so forth, Dan Rather sort of didn't know how to find himself.
And on Twitter now he's super very liberal, and
that's right. He's sort of leaned into, okay, is this the way it is? I can speak openly about my political leanings, and he had sort of an awkward exit himself, and a lot of those guys had awkward exits as news moved towards less just delivering a sort of quote unquote objective brand of news and moving towards opinion.
But also, they only had half an hour to fill.
That's true.
Remember, they were network primetime 6 o'clock, 6:30 news, but now you've got hour and a half shows, 24 hours just to fill.
Yeah.
And the loudest screaming head gets the attention.
Yeah, so these two networks, though, CNN, so we've talked about Don and Tucker may end up at News Nation. What does CNN and what do CNN and Fox do in the aftermath of this? Because really, Fox used to have Bill O'Reilly. He's gone. They had Sean Hannity. They still have Hannity.
Yeah.
He's now, I guess, their biggest anchor of a star.
Jesse Waters is at least in the interim, replacing Tucker.
Is going to replace Tucker in the interim. But Tucker's a very, very big star with a very big voice. He no longer wore the bow tie, but he was a big guy at Fox News.
It was the most watched show.
And Don Lemon, whether you love him or not, is a huge star at CNN. On that morning show, he was the anchor. I mean, he's the big name. They have other people there, Poppy Harlow and so forth, but even if you aggregate them, it's not clear to me that they have a sort of anchoring presence anymore. I guess they still have Tapper. Jake Tapper is still I guess, the biggest name there, but they've lost Cuomo. They've lost Don Lemon. A lot of the big, fiery, to your point, opinionated guys are gone. So maybe we are moving in the direction of this is going to be Jake Tapper's news network. And Jake Tapper is a bit more down the middle. He'll have some fiery exchanges, but they're fewer and far between.
Right. And like I said, we saw that sea change from the old Brokaws and Rathers and Peter Jennings to the more fiery people. Maybe we're seeing it again.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see what happens with this.
We'll have to see, and we'll have to see if News Nation really sort of leans into the opinionated stuff and carves out their own niche. If those other big sort of older networks like CNN and Fox News sort of move towards a more sort of stodgy, old-fashioned type of news.
And they have an aging audience, too, so you got to bring in younger people.
Yeah, we'll have to see. So I don't know how to do a pivot from Don Lemon and Tucker Carlson being let go to what happened with Desiigner.
He let go, too, in a way.
Desiigner let go as well. He's been released, so to speak. So
he released something.
Desiigner had quite a flight. So Desiigner, we broke this story on our website that Desiigner had an incident on the plane where he had exposed himself and he was briefly detained afterwards, but ultimately released. And he said he'd been struggling with maybe some mental health issues, and he was checking himself into a facility, but we didn't really know the details. And yesterday, what we got was the FBI's narrative of what happened on that flight. It was a flight from Tokyo to Minneapolis. I looked that up. That's about a 12-hour flight.
That's
nearly
a long
12-hour flight. It's very, very long. He had been touring over there, and he boards this flight. He's in first class, and he's now been charged with indecent exposure because the flight attendants said they were coming down the row about 60 to 90 minutes into the flight, so early in this long flight. And he had exposed himself. And the flight attendant walked by, looked at it, a female flight attendant, and said, no.
I love she just goes, no.
No. No verbs. That's all you need. Not put that away.
That's really all you need.
No.
And the control and the calm that she had to see he's just exposed himself, and she just goes, no.
Here's a firm no. Okay, so puts it away briefly, apparently takes it out again and begins masturbating. The flight attendant again tells him, sir, you gotta check that.
But this was a different flight attendant the second time, right?
Yes. There is a redhead and a blonde, according to this narrative.
That factors into this.
That does factor in. Apparently, a third time he exposed himself, and at that point, he was handed what is like a card that says, you're in violation of FAA rules and regulations. We are now sort of going to move you on the flight to the back. Apparently, he was flying with some other people who were in the back of the plane to sort of monitor you for the duration of the flight. We've got like 11 hours left of this flight, and they don't know what to do because the guy keeps taking out his wiener.
You can't even emergency landing if you want to because you're over the ocean.
That's right. You're over the Pacific. So here's what they do. They send him back. Apparently, he gets up from his seat. A jar of Vaseline falls down. So apparently, this was going to be an involved session for him and not just sort of a quick tug. But it's a gripping read. So no
come
pun
on.
intended.
I'd say you're better than that, but you're not. You're not.
So he goes back in the plane. He's monitored for the remainder of the flight. Then as he gets off, he's interviewed. He's detained at the airport in Minneapolis, where they say, hey, man, what's going on? And apparently Desiigner's explanation, according to these documents, was that he had been in Japan. He hadn't gotten much, quote unquote, cootie is what he said. And, he was aroused and he needed to do this. He said he admitted to seeing a attractive redhead. He took it out. He said he was trying to encourage her by doing
and
so.
And she said no.
Not sure that was encouraging, given her no. Then apparently saw a blonde. He did it again. He said, I always have to do these things twice. Now, he said they said he had some medications from Bangkok that had been prescribed to him for some sort of illness, but he hadn't taken them. He said, look, I'm not loopy on meds or anything. So they talked to him, and they ultimately released him. We got this comment that he was checking himself into some sort of facility. He's battling some mental health issues, and those are very, very serious.
Right. But
this is wild. This is a very strange story.
It's funny, but like Desiigner, if people don't remember, back in 2016, the song Panda was his big hit. And you remember he was just this ball of energy. We would always laugh every time we got him because he was just like making sounds like Chewbacca or something. So imagine that guy on a plane. He's like, well, I'm going to do it.
And since then, there have been some strange incidents. We get some videos sometimes where he's out in some road ragey type.
He was at a gas
station,
screaming at police that
also
he was
exposing
Desiigner
himself in other incidents, according to some of the previous stories. So there does seem to be something going on. I do think he needs, maybe some intervention, some help. I mean, we're saying some of this tongue in cheek, but it's not really funny. This is assaultive to people who are on flights.
And interesting about getting help. He had friends on the plane, but he was in first class, and his friends were in the back in coach. So he wasn't sitting with them. I'm guessing by himself. I guess he wasn't sitting beside anybody because probably on that flight you'd have those little pods. So he was probably.
I sure hope so.
You don't want to be sitting beside that guy.
That someone was next to him and went bing and need a little help here, a little assistance in seat number 3. So look, I don't think this will become a sort of huge legal issue. It's an indecent exposure. There's a punishment, I think, of up to 90 days in jail. This is not as though it's going to derail his life, but if he doesn't get this kind of behavior in check, he's on this path where he had this huge hit song. He's a little bit past that. I don't think he has another thing
it's been 7 years,
but he does have a degree of fame from the size of Panda.
Sure, it was a huge number one hit.
Yes, he's one of those guys who will always be famous. I like to think of them as because that song was so big and so iconic at the time. he'll never be able to navigate the world without people saying that's Desiigner. You know,
Right.
he's a known person. He's going to need to be able to handle that level of celebrity, even if he
Well, he
doesn't
can
have
handle
another
some
hit.
things. We know that.
Exactly, and handle things a little bit better than that. But
Actually, know what this makes me really want? Are there any, you watch more reality TV than I do. Are there
Just
any
a bit.
reality shows about flight attendants? Because think of the things they see on a plane.
that would be a great reality.
How many?
show.
You know, this is not
Why
the
are you
first.
doing that live on a podcast? You could have told me afterwards. and we
Crap!
could
I know. I
produce
should have
the
saved
thing.
that idea. No, but just
It's great.
You know, that's not the first time either of these flight attendants have seen a guy expose himself.
He must see some crazy stuff in first
But
class.
we know Lauren in the newsroom was a flight attendant, and she's got some crazy stories. So
We got to develop it with Lauren. We'll call it like behind the curtain. Just have Lauren's face. All right, that'll do it for us today. We'll see you guys next time.